I'm Sam Turner, the CTO of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. For those who don't know us, we're a network of manufacturing innovation centres driving growth in the manufacturing sector in the UK based on innovation and pulling through technology from the research base. A big part of our challenge, which is we're partly government funded, partly industrially funded, is driving productivity, driving performance, but also now driving sustainable manufacturing and driving towards the net zero agenda. So I want to talk to you today about innovating the way to net zero. I'm going to start with the pledge made by the UK government last year for net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Whilst that has a huge impact on global emissions and impact on the environment, as part of that commitment, there was a commitment from government that we would also look to seize the economic opportunities of becoming a greener economy. And one thing I want to explore today is how we can do that as a manufacturing community. Part of that is by looking at growth markets that are going to be addressing net zero solutions. So renewable energies, nuclear energy, decarbonised transport, be that electrification, hydrogen, aerospace, automotive, and net zero carbon buildings. But also through manufacturing, if we break down the terrestrial emissions in the UK from this BEIS report from 2017 to transport, industry, buildings, power, other, a big part of those emissions are attributable to the manufacturing industry. If we actually consider emissions that are embodied in our overseas supply chains that relate to our consumption, then the manufacturing emissions for the UK are somewhere between 15% at the lower end, or possibly up to 30% if we account for those manufactured goods overseas. Now, if we're accountable for those manufacturing emissions, we can do something about that in terms of addressing those emissions in the manufacturing community, and potentially start to grow UK content and make the UK a destination for manufacturers globally who want to reduce their manufacturing emissions. So the legislation provides an impetus and an opportunity for us to look at how we can decarbonise our businesses, our supply chains, and our products. Picking up on this point of consumption emissions, those consumed by UK citizens, and territorial emissions, those emitted from the UK, our consumption emissions are higher, relates to the difference in our trade balance. And we believe there's a reason we should be considering consumption emissions, not only because it's a more realistic accountability of what we consume as a UK nation, but also from a manufacturing perspective. If our consumption emissions are not considered and we don't account for embodied carbon in our overseas supply chains, there's a risk that we have the unintended consequence of offshoring our supply chains. This is a trend we've seen in the past, where certain manufacturing sectors that are in energy intensive or polluters have been offshored to regions with lower regulation in place. What we want to do is turn the net zero commitment into an opportunity for UK engineering firms and UK manufacturers. So we need to have a standardised way of accounting for emissions through a supply chain, so that we account for supply chain emissions in the UK and overseas in exactly the same way. We treat everyone fairly, and we incentivise those businesses who want to innovate and invest in net zero carbon solutions, as we expect in the short term to be some cost in those innovations. I'll come on to how we can help to de-risk those and support those wishing to invest in factory or product manufacturing solutions that drive towards net zero. So if we account for supply chain emissions and we can agree those cross-industry norms and standards, then UK suppliers can become the most competitive in the world, competing not only on cost and quality and delivery, but absolutely on embedded carbon and sustainability. To do this, we do need to be able to develop adopted norms and standards across sectors, through supply chains, and with some of our international trading partners. But digitally tracking and tracing emissions will be a huge part of that solution. So there's a big digital challenge to evidence our emissions through a supply chain. So we think about the products that we make and how we can, at the design, both making products that have low life cycle emissions in terms of their intent, like energy and transport decarbonisation, but also design products in such a way that we minimise life cycle emissions. So thinking about a circular economy design process rather than a normal linear approach. Traditionally, around 80% of the environmental impacts and emissions of a product are locked in during its design phase. So that may be the choice of raw materials in terms of extraction of virgin raw materials from the ground or from the ecosystem. It could be emissions through the manufacturing life cycle, and it could also, in many cases, the larger emissions are through the life cycle and service life cycle of the product. But also then considering about how material choice and products can be recycled at end of life. Secondary material markets are a big part of this. So looking at how do we select materials that are recyclable? How do we develop new materials that are recyclable? And how do we convert waste into new value? So reducing extraction of finite raw materials and moving to materials that are recycled or can be extracted from existing products. Aluminium is a great example where the consumption of aluminium in the UK equates to the aluminium that is in cycle and could be recycled to meet our national need. We believe that the industrial Internet of Things will be a key enabler for this in terms of tracking and tracing a product throughout its life cycle and enabling reuse of materials and components for a second life. Designing for through life is crucial, and actually look at some of the high value assets that we think are going to be part of the answer to delivering net zero in terms of energy, transport and buildings. These high value assets benefit from a through life engineering approach. Digitalization will help us build robust models and design products, not just for a point of sale contract, but for life extension. And then looking at monitoring diagnostics and prognostic systems through life will also upgrade and inform those models and help us maximize life extension, minimize usage of energy and raw materials, and potentially enable not just repair at appropriate interventions in the life cycle, but upgrades of key components. Also, net zero impacts on the way that we make the products. So thinking about resource efficiency in manufacturing systems, we see three major intervention opportunities here. One is looking at technology to improve manufacturing processes. Another is looking at new materials to reduce material impacts. And the other is the use of clean energy. And that's not just being able to switch over to clean electricity, but thinking about other sources of energy and heat, industrial symbiosis, decarbonising our heat sources, moving away from hydrocarbon-based solutions. Now, the manufacturing process technology, a big part of that will be in-factory digital and automation technologies. So think about the manufacturing life cycle. So this is a generic life cycle with some examples specific to different sectors in here. But broadly, the old linear cycle starts with raw materials extraction. The circular hopefully looks at reuse of raw materials and recycling components feeding back into the materials processing stage and the subcomponent manufacturing stage. At each stage here, whether we're talking about an aero engine fan manufacture or fabrics or bricks for construction, there's an opportunity to optimize resource efficiency, so reduce material consumption, reduce energy consumption, and move towards net zero. So take the example from an aerospace where we have a term around buy to fly ratios, where it's not uncommon to have 20% or less of the raw stock material is actually the finished product that goes onto a plane. There's a huge amount of material wastage and energy and other materials consumed in producing that component from its raw stock. So can we develop manufacturing processes that take us to near net form, that reduce material consumption, assembly processes, sub-assembly processes that can look at reducing energy consumption and other utilities, looking at things like energy harvesting in the factory environments, and also for each of these blue arrows, looking at how do we minimize emissions associated with transportation logistics. So distributed manufacturing, where we have localized manufacturing rather than the traditional centralized global manufacturing supply chains that can all help us to reduce emissions. In each of these purple boxes, there are opportunities for technology providers and UK manufacturers to differentiate and bring new solutions to market, to compete on a net zero agenda or bring new tech to the market. We've reviewed a number of sectors and looked at roadmaps that exist that are published nationally, internationally, sector roadmaps, corporate roadmaps. We've identified a number of common cross-cutting themes that are addressable for UK manufacturers. I'll pick out of these resource-efficient production as one big challenge area. Digitalisation, in terms of optimising in factory using AI, not only to optimise for quality, waste reduction and control, but for minimising energy and material usage. And also designing for circular economy and carbon net zero. So looking at digital tools that drive life cycle analysis and enable us to avoid that 80% emissions lock-in, or minimise the 80% emissions lock-in at the design phase. So the Catapult can support, HVM Catapult and the wider Catapult network help businesses who are looking to decarbonise, both in terms of the products we're trying to produce that may in themselves address net zero challenges, the way we design those products for minimised emissions through the life cycle, the way we look at material selection or develop next generation materials that are recyclable, and then thinking about resource efficiency, both in factory and through supply chains. Digital technologies will play a big role in traceability of materials and goods, enabling net zero carbon factories and supply chains, and also in bringing new business models to market, such as servitization and through-life engineering. These changes and the net zero pledge brings an opportunity for the UK to become a global destination for sustainable manufacturing and a net technology exporter. The UK has declined over the last 20 years in terms of its manufacturing content and footprint globally in relative terms. That can be redressed if we are recognised as a destination for net zero manufacturing, and every business has the opportunity to differentiate itself from some of the global competition on that basis. And our manufacturing technology sector has also declined over time. We have about 1% of the global market in terms of manufacturing technology. But if we can start to provide the solutions that enable domestic and an international sustainable manufacturing supply chain and footprint, then we can become a leader again in manufacturing technology solutions. Both the physical hardware that delivers sustainable manufacturing processes and the digital systems that can monitor, optimize, and provide decision support tools for manufacturers and engineering firms alike. So where to for the UK? We only have 1.1% of global emissions, but the impact we're going to have in delivering net zero by 2050 can be much greater than our 1% of emissions. We can impact the world as a leader and an exporter of sustainable manufacturing technology, delivering on our pledge, reducing global emissions by more than 1.1%, showing national leadership, and delivering economic growth for UK manufacturers and technology providers as we do so. The UK can become a global supply chain destination for manufacturing through sustainable innovation. For anybody interested in finding out more, please do come and ask questions and contact us, me and colleagues at the HVM Catapult stand here at Digital Manufacturing Week. I hope you really enjoy the rest of the week. I hope you enjoy the day today looking at sustainable innovation, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Every year, the high-value manufacturing Catapult meets thousands of ambitious small businesses like yours who see an opportunity to make big gains. But it's not easy. The cost and effort needed to take an idea to market can be risky, especially for smaller companies. We're here to help. Whatever your size, we give you the power to transform the products you sell, the way you make them, and the skills of your workforce, improving your company's performance. Embrace innovation and get in touch today.